Gone are the days when stores were glass houses for transactions. Today, they stand as dynamic expressions of a brand's soul, embodying values, mirroring the aspirations of their customers. They've transformed into gathering places for communities of like-minded enthusiasts, almost sanctuaries where brand fans converge, not just to shop, but to connect with one another and the brand itself. In this sort of brave new world, these spaces are no longer just about commerce, but about courage. The courage of creatives to push boundaries, to explore uncharted sort of sensory dimensions, and to match the modern consumer's generosity with innovation and experience. Retail itself is reimagined, not as a destination, but as a journey where every touch point, every moment of truth is an opportunity to make a statement, to engage and to inspire. And on that note, welcome to the Phygital Lab. Please join us as we delve into the stories of transformed spaces, the visionaries who craft them, and the experiences that define them. In this episode that we're calling Reimagining Retail, we examine the evolving role of the physical store and the stories they must convey at this sort of juncture of digital innovation and physical experience. Joining us today is Giovanni Zaccariello. I hope I pronounced his name correctly. Giovanni is the Senior Vice President of Global Visual Experience at Coach. Giovanni's been reshaping the retail experience through innovative design and customer engagement, taking brand storytelling to new dimensions. With a career spanning more than 2 decades, he's not only leading initiatives that have directly challenged the traditional retail boundaries, things such as mixed reality at locations in London, Soho and New York, all the way to conceptual in-store experiences like in Singapore. He is a man and our guest who is actually pushing the envelope on how brands engage and remain memorable. So Giovanni, it's great to have you here. Welcome.
Thank you for that great welcome. Great to be on this podcast today.
Excellent. And it's good to have you here. So to kick us off, I want to jump straight into you and your role. So could you shed some light on what your day-to-day entails at Coach and perhaps share an aspect of your work that you find exciting?
Yeah, I get this question a lot. No, every day is the same, which I'm sure you hear that a lot, which just kind of makes my job so exciting. I love what I do, so some of the days are quite long. We have a lot of teams internationally, so there's a lot happening around the world at Coach. So my job is to kind of tie it all together into one brand language. So the job is quite vast. So if you think about stores, if you think about even outside of stores, pop-ups, if you think about mobile experiences, the world is so omni today. So I would say stores, but also like bigger than stores and everything connected. As you know, the customer sees everything without us knowing. So my job is to really tie it all together into one cohesive vision and also like changing the boundaries. I think you said that at the very beginning, which kind of resonates with me a lot. And I think that's why our first conversation was so dynamic. The consumer is moving so much faster than he used to do 20, 30 years ago, even just 5 years ago, pre-pandemic, right? So my job is to continue to push the boundaries to move at the speed of the consumer.
I love the answer. And it's I'm glad the beginning intro resonated with you, because I think that absolutely everybody that I speak to has a very similar view. Doesn't quite articulate it exactly the same, but there's a very similar theme in that whether we talk about online, offline, this channel, that channel, this presence, that presence, it's all merging into one. And everything is so transparent these days. The customer can access and see everything you're trying to hide and everything you're trying to show them. And I think, and that's really interesting. I mean, how do you think digital technology is sort of reshaping the landscape of retail spaces? And before you answer, it would be good if you could share us with us a sort of a specific instance where Coach has managed to blend physical elements in a way that resonates.
So there's two things I'm going to touch upon. Number one is I think a lot of people are talking about, like the journey. And I think for me, the consumer journey oversees like the brand journey. If you think about how is the brand going to come to life, but thinking about how is the consumer actually going to experience the brand. So kind of flipping it on its head. And believe it or not, before even we start designing anything, we talk about what are the touch points, which kind of changes the design process at its core, if you think about it, because, some of the designers will have a brief and we'll go into ideation versus, okay, what is the consumer insight? What is the data telling us? What is the journey? And how do we expect them to get from A to B? Which in some cases is, it's challenging to know, especially in different regions, right? They react differently. And then we start the process. So I think that's at the very foundation of how we're approaching, whether it's physical or digital. For me, I think one of the things that I learned a lot during the pandemic was that a lot of brands were kind of pushing digital for the sake of pushing digital. Like, oh, let's add a screen to our store. And that's not really digital, that's just a screen playing content, right? I think for me, it's about doing less and really focusing more on digital to enhance the experience, maybe shopping easier, or really adding more to the experience, whether it's education, whether it's about helping you reshaping how you're buying, how fast you're buying. Because, some people may not want to talk to staff. Some people may want to talk to staff. So we don't know that when they walk through the door. So a few experiences I can think about. One of them is the Tabby Tour. So we have launched a global Tabby campaign last spring. And as part of this gorgeous Tabby truck that traveled the world, giving away ice cream and, of course, selling our number one bag, Tabby, we also developed a game. We knew there was going to be lines, so instead of them just waiting around while they were waiting in line, they could do a personality game. And we know Gen Z love a personality test. And we got so much good information about what kind of people they are, what they're interested in. So by the time they get to the truck, they kind of knew what flavor of ice cream they wanted and what Tabby bag they were. And I think, again, it didn't feel forced. It became part of the experience. It made people stay in the experience for 4 to 6 times longer than they used to in the past. So that's kind of one example. I can think about, like, really reshaping the idea of gaming in a different way. The second example is something that you mentioned, is the Singapore Shop House, where it's basically a traditional shop house in Singapore, in a place where there was no other brands before. It was only coffee shops and hospitality, and Coach decided to kind of land their first Coach Play store in the world there. And now we've seen other brands opening there. On the 3rd floor of the space, we've actually created an immersive room where you can learn more about Coach crafts. So we have such good heritage and such strong history, but in some cases, when you think about history, it feels a little dusty. But we've used this space to really bring it to life with a Gen Z lens, making it more engaging and fun. Again, on the 2nd floor, you can experience the craftsmanship bar, the co-creation space, and then you go on the 3rd floor and you can actually get immersed into the history. So it kind of all comes together. It's not detached. All the experiences are very correlated. So that's just another example. And then a third example is Coachtopia. So as you've seen, we've been doing a lot of Coachtopia pop-ups and experiences around the world, mainly physical, but in some locations like Singapore, but also in Japan, we created something called Cloud Canvas. So one of the icons of Coachtopia is clouds. And you can basically become a clouds into the screen, and kind of that shares, and you learn more about Coachtopia that way. And it became such an important TikTok sensation because you can bring people together. You can fly through the clouds with a friend, and then a friend brings another friend. So it kind of created this community aspect into the space. And again, it felt very part of the Coachtopia branding and language versus being its own separate thing. So in most cases, when we design from the beginning together. And when it makes sense, we layer it in, but it's not always a must, if that makes sense, the digital piece. So it needs to enhance.
This is really interesting. I've got another question that's going to lead on exactly from what you just said around Coachtopia. But what's interesting there for me is you kind of nailed it, where you're not starting with technology at all. You're not starting with a brief per se. You're starting from the consumer's perspective. You're looking at touch points. You've considered queuing. Although the main event worth or the main sort of signature moment is to get them interacting with something that you've just developed, whatever type of immersive campaign it is, you've also considered the various touch points leading up to that. And I wonder if it's that mindset and taking that approach that then that creates more clarity when the customer has gone through that journey that you've created, and then it turns out the reaction is so positive, it's so overwhelmingly positive, that it allows you to then reuse other elements of that experience, other assets, the outputs of that sort of feedback loop in other areas of activation. And it's very interesting. And I think that's, if any lesson is to be taken away today, it's that don't start with technology. Don't start with the brief. Start with the human.
And we have, there is a lot of consumer insights that kind of we start the discussions of the seasons, of course. So that what I do, of course, fits into a larger marketing umbrella and marketing orchestration. But for me, it's consumer before the brand, because otherwise you're kind of forcing something onto the humans versus the humans telling you what they're interested in or how they want to shop. So, and there is a lot of those things where, as I mentioned before, we are testing and learning a lot of new things. Our technology is moving so much faster than it used to be. The idea is not to really latch on any new trends, but it's really to understand, okay, this is what I want to get done. What is technology that's going to help me do that, instead of just saying, oh, this is such a shiny object, let me get on top of that. So it's a little bit of the reverse, because you see sometimes a lot of people just trying to do the same thing at the same time, versus like, what is the problem we're trying to solve, and then create a strategy and orchestration around figuring out how to solve it.
So with these experiences that you created, you just shared 3 sort of immersive campaigns or phygital activation, so to speak. A lot, you could argue that these carry risks, and when it's either a visual merchandising department, brand department, store experience department, when they're looking to approach integrating some sort of form of experience within the store, it obviously comes with some inherent levels of risks. Are there either of those 3, or is there another example you could say you've had to take kind of a leap of faith in the design process, but it's actually paid off big time?
Yeah, I think one example I would love to mention is our partnership with 010, which again was not just a big PR success, but was also actually a consumer transaction success, where we partnered with 010, which is an AR experiential company. Actually, now they're working with a lot of other brands, but we tested a concept in Soho where for the first time ever, we brought in a AR screen into a window, where we were basically stopping customers just passing by. And the old KPI of that, we want to get more food stepped into the store. That was very simple, very simple. We got lines outside of our store. We had people, Soho is incredibly busy. You can just imagine all these New Yorkers trying to walk the dog and do this and do that. People were stopping and they were trying to play with the bag. And again, it was reimagining Tabby through different filters. We tested one location. We had such incredible success. And now for the holiday season, we went to 5 stores. We saw that the digital screen in the window was successful. The one inside the store was not. So we actually killed the one in store and only focused on windows. So we are taking learning from the first phase, and into the second phase, we adjusted some of that. And for holiday, of course, it's very similar, but it's very, of course, festive. And you can send, like little tins of information to friends and family for the holiday season. So, and God knows what's next. But we always kind of like proof test, pressure test and learn, experiment, see what works, and then trying to roll it out in more locations. So, but it worked. So, and again, it was a big risk. We never worked with 010 before. We also had never expected the window to be a success story, but we had select KPIs around it. There is also a lot of openness about testing new things. Now that we're continuing to testing and things are working out different, it was very different 10 years ago or 5 years ago, even pre-pandemic. So we also tested virtual stores with Obsess a few years ago during the pandemic, where our showrooms were shut down, so we had no choice but going virtual. That also was a big success story. Again, for that piece, we decided not to go away from that because we want to actually people to shop in the real world as a brand. So, we test and then we decide what to do. Do we proceed to do more, or do we just pause and don't do it and move the efforts and the budget into other areas? So Yeah, a lot of thinking, but also a lot of encouragement for management to kind of continue to push the boundaries.
So it's almost cultural, isn't it? Internally, it's that sort of, if you've got that internal sponsorship to push the boundaries, think, be creative, don't be fearful of technology. But I also hear on the other side, sort of right side versus left side. You've got on the other side, you're enforcing KPIs. There are definitely things that you expect and you want to see from the experience. It may well be that this part of it was a lot more popular or a lot more successful than this part of it, and to your surprise, then I'm assuming you'll then go and investigate why.
Yeah.
And then that's all part of the well, the success of it again, isn't it? And the measuring and the learning from it.
Yeah, we use the word magic and logic, coach. So it's kind of like that blend of both of them. And then also like somehow accepting the learnings, right? We don't just move on to the next project. You know, there's a lot of thinking about ways with my team, especially we sit down and just saying, okay, we knew that look great, but did it really work? Right? 'Cause some of those things can be big PR stunts, but they don't work with your KPIs. And that's why I think starting with the KPIs and understanding what is the problem we're trying to solve, it's really important. So it's just a little bit of an approach. To your point, it's cultural. But now we go into a rhythm, and even the team now is part of our day-to-day language as creators.
I mean, speaking of culture, when it comes to scoping out, building out, and one of these sort of immersive experiences or phygital experiences, like you achieved in through Coachtopia in Singapore and through the MXR displays. How does, you know, within visual merchandising, storytelling is crucial. How do you approach or adapt from a sort of global visual language perspective in different cultures? What's your process there?
So actually, this question we get a lot because we do a lot of projects around the world. So one of the projects I can talk to as an example is Coach Play. So Singapore is one of the Coach Play locations. So all of the Coach Play stores, and we have 2 in North America. We have 1 in Japan. We have 1 in Singapore. We're about to open 1 in Malaysia very soon, 1 in China very soon. So we have an identified identity for those locations, like thinking about look and feel, color palette, material palette, the way we want to bring the 5 senses to life. But then we really work with each of the regions to localize. Localization is a great part of our culture as well. So I have very strong teams in each region. They look at the idea like, oh, maybe in Singapore we can do this because this is what works here, right? Like, for example, in Singapore, Shop House was our first Coach Cafe. The location was in a street where full of coffee shops. I'm like, okay, this is amazing news. It means people want to go there and spend money, open the laptops, and maybe work out. We've never done that at Coach, so let's give it a go. So we opened the first coffee shop. We learned a lot from it. Now we may be rolling out additional ones. Or in places like Japan, for example, when we did Coach Play in Harajuku, I'm like, okay, has to be cute, has to be kawaii. That's like the cute word in Japanese. So we worked with local artists to bring cute neons to life in the space. So, but of course, everything was through this color palette that was consistent throughout all of them. So if you put all of them side by side, they look like they're part of the same family. One is a brother, one is a sister, one is an uncle, but they have different dimensions because we incredibly localize things, whether it's through hospitality, whether it's through different playlists that we play in the stores, whether it's through different artists that we bring in to customize and making it up the facade, or murals or neons, or even furniture that we maybe locally source. Of course, we can do many of them because it's a huge undertaking. And if we do 2 in the same city, then the one does not become special anymore. But a lot of work goes into the details. And knowing that our brand identity is all about courage to be real and self-expression, this is the pinnacle of that, right? Because then you really are customizing and creating different expressions of the brand throughout the world with a consistent heart and consistent thread and soul. So a lot of work, but so far those stores have been performing well, and also they've been huge learning hubs for us for more things to come in the next 16 to 18 months for us.
Yeah, it's interesting. It almost sounds like that. I don't know whether it's a philosophy that you talked about, blending logic and magic.
Yeah.
it almost sounds like that's a framework. And then when you go into, even when you're going into other cultures or other locations, you're then within that sort of framework, and within that context, you're applying the same philosophy, but you're looking at what makes the location unique. Let's explore the five senses. How can we alter the sound of what people hear to make sure that it's localized to the environment? The same goes for materials, same goes for lighting, same goes for what people can almost taste through their sense of smell. And this is all sort of fascinating, but then ultimately you're creating this consistency to ensure that everybody recognizes that this is Coach doing it, but they're adapting. And this is really interesting. So, I mean, from a visual merchandising perspective, when you consider everything that's happening right now and the pace of which things are sort of, let's say, moving forward, less innovating, but moving forward, progressing, what are you most excited about that's helping you with the storytelling part of what you're doing?
First of all, I'm excited about Coach and what we're doing. And I think the road ahead, I think the customers are reacting. We are recruiting Gen Z in a different way. Like a year ago, we were maybe their mother's brand, and now they are telling us that we also their brand, which is very exciting. It means we're doing something right in some areas of the business. So that's incredible, and kind of gives us the ammunition to do more and to take more risks. I think I'm excited about the potential of the brand. I think what we have done in 2023 is just laid the foundation for, like 2024 and years ahead. And what I love about this, it is the globalization of things. I do love the fact that we approach every project as a global team, but also as a local team, because I've lived for the brand in Asia for 5 years. So I really understand the dynamics and also the differences and what resonates. And again, even within Asia, there's different cultures. Even within Europe, there's different cultures. So you can't just bucket things together. It's just not going to work. And I think we have created the culture of that at Coach, and I think that's gonna be part of how we continue to work. I'm also excited to see the team shine. I mean, most of the teams that we brought in are very international. The team is incredibly diverse, not just from where they come from, but also from their thoughts. They come from different parts of the industry. So, and I think that's helped shape somehow this new culture of creation and creators. I just want to see more people shop Coach and even just consume the Coach brand just by immersing themselves. Maybe not even coming to the store to buy a bag, but to spend time with us, learning about us, and like self-express. And this is not a marketing jargon; it's real. Like we don't sometimes in some of the experience we don't force products. We really want them to get to know the brand and maybe shop with us, but maybe just have a cup of coffee with us, or learning about, or playing a game, or whatever they may be in the future. But I think brand consumption is as important as brand purchase. So I usually talk to the team about experience per square foot. Everybody's like, oh, what is how many dollars per square foot you're going to make? I'm like, what about experience per square foot? How are you touching their customer heart when they walk in? Because if you touch their heart, they will open the wallet. If you don't touch that, it's going to be a forced purchase. They're not going to remember who you are. So I think creating the emotional connection is what I'm all about. And again, to your point, that can happen through all kinds of different gimmicks. But yeah, I think we're just getting started. I know I say this to the team every day. So it's exciting, and also think the way the world is shaping, right? There's so much bad stuff happening in the world, and I think retail is such a power to bring people together. And I think this idea of community is definitely at the heart of what I'm thinking the next chapter for us is. Not just literally getting in together for a Coach event, but like, how do we really create those big moments where they're more celebratory, even as a brand, which are maybe not connected to a fashion show, things like that, just bringing people together. I still don't know what that is yet, but I think it's a huge thing that I'm kind of keen to do in the next year.
That's interesting. And it's experience per square foot. I love that. And that could, but it sounds like a KPI, doesn't it?
It is. It is. Yeah.
A form of OKR that we should be measuring. Instead of transactions per square foot or per square meter, or dwell time around a particular product range or product, we should be looking at how do we measure emotional engagement of people while they're within our vicinity, and how do we follow that through when they touch us again, whether it's online through social media or a TikTok video, an appreciation video, whatever it might be. And it's interesting. I mean, if you had your way, I'm going to put you on the spot now. What would be your metrics? What would be your metrics that you'd use to measure? Let's say you got one, which is experience per square meter. But what do you think in your heart tells you that you should be measuring when it comes to this new way of retail?
Yeah, do you know what? I get fascinated. That's why when I travel, I spend a lot of time observing people. When people walk in and somehow they're like, oh, is this Coach? And we're doing something new, and really seeing their expression on their face. And I mean, you don't see it, but their heart is like, oh my God, I like this, right? They touch the bag, they might not touch the bag, but when they come in and they're kind of looking through and they're spending time with us, and maybe they're telling their friends, that for me, I don't even know if that's a KPI, whatever we want to call that, but that for me goes beyond the number on a piece of paper on an Excel sheet, because that element will stay with her for years to come, right? If they come and see the bag and the bag is functional, they buy the bag, great. But after 2 months, they're going to forget about the space. Of course, they're going to see the bag every day, but the experience and how you make them feel, it's the thing that has got much more longevity. I think that's what I'm more interested in.
Yeah. It's almost as if the bag was the instant gratification from a physical point of view that they took away from the experience, but you've got to have created that emotional engagement in that environment there and then. And I love that. And then maybe when they're home or when they're out with their friends, when they grab that bag, they get a moment, they get a memory. You know, there's a recall of going, you know, and that's that positive association, isn't it? And that's what more could you ask for if every time they thought of you, it was in a positive association.
So, and we have seen that most of the Coach Play stores. You know, sometimes like, oh, can we add an Instagram moment to the store? The entire Coach Play location is an Instagrammable moment, like the entire space. So people literally come in, they get the phone out. They get the phone out. Like, that's like insane. And then they start telling their friends, they do TikToks in the fitting room, they start dialogue with their mom. What do you think of this? Like, it's just so interactive without anyone even approaching you. So that's why for me, the consumer journey, understanding, okay, they walk in, how do we wow them so they can keep coming through? Especially in a store like Singapore Shop House, where we have 3 floors. How do you get them engaged throughout, right? So again, consumer journey. So,
I think you're absolutely right. Now, I know you're a busy man. I know you've got lots of things going on this afternoon, so I'm not going to keep you much longer. But just one final question to sort of round us off. You've traveled the world. You've lived in different cultures, different areas, you know, from Asia to Big NY to or across Europe. You mentioned earlier, Europe's, you know, got its what we call face-based cultures, but then you've got lots of nuances inside. How does your own personal heritage, Italian, living in all these different places, how does that influence your process for sort of ideation, execution for Coach?
I don't think I could do what I do today without having lived in Europe and Asia, because I will be working in a box somehow. I think understanding the diversity has definitely been an advantage. And I think that's why I've tried to even build a team that is incredibly diverse, so that we have different thoughts around. So very exciting there. And I think also like the reason why I call New York home is because this is the most diverse place in the world, and there's no place I'd rather be. So I kind of have the New York mindset, really.
So it's everything. You would feel like you're in some kind of box.
Exactly. Yeah, I think it's definitely an advantage in people that do my job. So
that's awesome. Giovanni, I really appreciate the time that you've given me today. I've learned a lot from you, and I hope that our paths will somehow cross again in the future. I'm excited about what Coach is doing. I'm excited that you're at the center with this great, young, creative, expansive team around you, kind of supporting you. You're all. I love. If we're to give any advice from this sort of short chat we've had, though, it's, you know, putting the customer journey first, thinking about those moments and literally wearing the shoes of the customer, considering every element from queuing to getting excited around a changing room. If you're building a framework, think about magic and logic, which is right, left side. And when you do that and you're going around the world, enforce the same rules. Don't be afraid to create your own KPIs. You just created two here, experience per square foot being one of them. Yeah, as I say, I'm excited to see what happens with Coach next, and I'll be on the lookout for it. So
yeah, well, stay in touch.
thank you
Thank you
very
for having
much.
me. Okay, appreciate
Thank
it.
you.
Bye.